All right, so moving on to chapter 14, emotional and social development in our 20 to 40-year-olds. I talked to you a little bit about this last lecture about that kind of period between 18 and 22-ish when you're not really an adult, but you're not really an adolescent anymore, and we're calling that emerging adulthood. It's kind of this new area of study that we have in developmental psychology. So it's a gradual transition from the late teens into the early 20s where you're kind of exploring what you want to do, what your values are, what kind of relationships you want to have. We don't have a lot of social expectations on our 18 to 22-year-olds. No one's looking at a 20-year-old and being like, hey, how come you're not married with kids with a, full-time, well-paying job yet? All right, we know that it kind of takes a while and you're kind of figuring out what it means to be a grown-up, to be an adult. All right, so there's a lot of kind of cultural change that's happening between, as you move into adulthood, that it's making it more difficult to actually be an adult. Like, how do we even say, like, okay, I feel like I'm an adult? What do adults do? Adults, own homes and have cars and, pay bills and, think about 401ks, right? Like, these are things that you're not really thinking about that much as you're kind of coming into learning how to be an adult. Because entry-level jobs require more and more education, we tend to live at home longer. Even though we've graduated from college, we don't have enough money to kind of live on our own yet, which is going to delay financial independence. It can also delay career commitment because if you're not, kind of making good money, you're not really moving around, you don't really know, is this really what I want to do or not? This is much more typical in wealthy nations, right? We don't see emerging adulthood happening in our developing countries. You're an adult pretty much when you, hit puberty and you get married and you have babies, the end. And now you start doing adult things. We're, spoiled, in our industrialized countries where we're given the time to kind of slowly become adults and take on those adult responsibilities. So for Erikson, we are now in intimacy versus isolation. So this is number 6, stage 6. Intimacy is making a permanent commitment to an intimate partner. It involves redefining your identity to some extent. So you don't want to change who you are, but you are kind of changing from being a single person to a person in a relationship who also puts those person's needs along with your own. You really need to have a secure identity to have good intimacy. Right? So from the last stage of identity versus role confusion, if you don't know who you are, then you're not going to really know who you want to be in a relationship with, and you'll end up being in relationships with people that don't really fit you well. If you have a nice secure identity, then you can find intimacy, right? You don't want to be like not knowing who you are, and so you're trying to find someone to tell you who you are. Right? That whole idea of like, you complete me no, that's BS. You want to be complete. You need to be a whole person. You need to find someone else who is also complete and understands who they are. And then you need to make a little Venn diagram and say, okay, now we can come together, right? People shouldn't be your missing piece. You should be completely full, know who you are, and then find someone that complements you and fits well with you. And that requires a nice, good, solid understanding of your own identity. Isolation's the other side of that, right? More loneliness, kind of stuck in a state of searching, never really finding someone. This has a lot to do with not knowing who you are and your own identity. Isolation's negatively associated with fidelity and love. If you don't really know who you are and you're kind of not really into having intimacy, you're more likely to cheat on your significant other and to not actually feel love for someone. Intimacy is also going to be linked with that very first stage of Erikson, that trust versus mistrust. All right, people who've never really learned to trust other people are going to have a really hard time with intimacy. All right, going to have a really hard time opening themselves up and letting someone come in, because if I do that, then they can hurt me. And so people who have trust issues have a very difficult time getting fully into the intimacy side of this and end up more on the isolation side. And these are people who a lot of times end up divorced or have divorced multiple times, in and out of relationships a lot. So the social clock is when specific times for when a culture says things are supposed to happen. So they're age-graded expectations for life events. we're supposed to do these at these times. So in America, we tend to say you should get married around your 20s or early 30s. You also should be having children around your late 20s, early 30s. These are when things are supposed to happen. When we follow the social clock, we tend to feel more confident. And it does contribute to social stability. If all of a sudden all of the 14 to 50-year-olds started having babies, that would really throw our society off, right? We are set up to kind of have things happen in very specific ways. And when people follow that social clock, we kind of reward that. If we don't have that, we tend to not feel good, right? And other people tend to kind of look more negatively at us, right? When you hit your mid-20s into your early 30s, if you're not married yet, like, you're going to have all of these people like, when are you going to get married? What's going on here? And when you are married, when are you going to have kids, right? Like, this is when you're supposed to do it. You don't have to do it then, obviously, but you are going to feel more social pressure if you don't follow the social clock. So when we're finding someone to be our mate, a couple of things fall into this. Number one, you're going to tend to find someone within the same physical proximity as you. That's just how it is. Most people find their significant other at work, at school, at their gym, through their friends, right? There are people who live around them. Even if you use the internet to find someone, if you use an app, you're still finding someone within the same physical proximity as you, right? Most people don't find the love of their lives, in Stockholm or whatever. They're usually within the same kind of area as you. We tend to select partners who are similar to us. So the idea that opposites attract is completely wrong and not supported by data. We like people who like the same things as us. Think about if you were completely different from your partner, if you loved everything they hated and they hated everything you loved, you would not get along. You would hate each other. It wouldn't be a good match. So our kind of core things about who make us us and what we love and what we really care about need to match up in order for a relationship to work. Women tend to look for intelligence in a man, ambition, financial status, and good morals. And men tend to look for attractiveness and domestic skills. Sorry, guys, it really does make you sound like, gross. And this is heterosexual women and men, by the way. So, why do women tend to look for ambition and financial status while men tend to look for more attractiveness and domestic skills? How do we know that? Well, when we have people list out what's most important to you when looking for a significant other, women put financial stability, having a job, being funny, being nice at the top of their list. Men tend to put good looking, can cook at the top of their list. And it goes back to very, very, very basic, human biology of the woman wants the man to be able to support her if she's going to be having children, because once we have kids, our ability to make money goes down, our likelihood of not returning to our career goes down, and we need to make sure that the person who we are breeding with is going to make sure that we still have a house to live in with these babies and food to feed them. And men are like, okay, if I'm going to be making babies with you, I want to make sure that you are fertile, which attractiveness kind of leads to that, and, can take care of my babies. It's kind of a horrifying way of looking at things, but we do still see this being the case, up through, recently. We don't see this changing. All right, so our friendships at this age, same-sex friendships, we do see some gender differences with women's friendships being more intimate, same as we saw, back in high school and even grade school. Women share more than men do. Longer friendships tend to be more intimate. You tend to share more with the friends you've been friends with for a longer period of time. And single people tend to have more friends, and more friends that they have kind of an intimate closeness with, that they can open up to and talk to about what's going on. Friendships with the opposite sex tend to be fewer and shorter lasting. Educated and employed women have the most opposite sex friends, right? Because they're in the workforce and they have friends with, males who they work with a lot of the time. There is a benefit to both genders for having an opposite sex friend. For men, it can give them an opportunity to kind of open up more and be more intimate as far as, sharing with someone without, being made fun of. And for women, it can kind of give them, other views and not just women's views, like how are guys looking at this? But you do need to be aware of sexual attraction happening if you have an opposite sex friendship and you are a heterosexual person. And if you are married, you need to be, walk that line pretty, carefully, because the more you have in common with someone and the more you hang out with somebody, the more likely you are to start developing romantic feelings for them. So if you have opposite sex friends, you need to kind of put a line where, we hang out at work and maybe we grab lunch every now and then, but we're not gonna, go out to dinner and see a movie by ourselves. All right, so our trends in marriage here in the United States, we're marrying later than we ever have. Almost everybody gets married at least once, right? 90% of people are going to get married. We do have fewer marriages, though, than we used to, right? Back in the day, everybody got married. Didn't matter. You got married. You were gay, didn't matter. You got married. Right? Everybody's getting married. So we do see more people staying single. We have a lot more people cohabitating, so living together and not getting married, than we have in the past. And we have a lot of people that aren't remarrying. So, 30, 40 years ago, you got a divorce, you almost always got remarried. Nowadays, you get a divorce, not as many people are remarrying as they used to. With the legalization of same-sex marriage, we do see more marriages happening because now, that 5 to 6% of the population is now allowed to get married and not just have to stay single. So we have different types of marriages, traditional and egalitarian. With the traditional marriages, there's kind of this clear division of roles. It's kind of, that kind of traditional way of life where the woman's job is to care for the husband and the children in the home and be the entertainer and make sure that all that's taken care of. And the man is the head of the household and he's the one that has the job and supports things. A more egalitarian marriage, the partners are seen as more equal. They share authority for all things, and there's a balance between jobs, children, home, and everyone kind of pitching in. And it's not just falling on one spouse to do one thing and the other spouse to do the other. And you may have a combination of a traditional egalitarian. You may be traditional in some things and egalitarian in others. It's really whatever works best for the people in the relationship. If a traditional marriage works better for you and your partner, then that's what you should do. If an egalitarian works best, then that's what you should do. It's up to the partners, not to society to tell you which one's better for you. So marital satisfaction in general is related to, number one, family backgrounds. People who come from intact, good, loving families tend to have intact, loving marriages. In fact, your likelihood of divorce is very highly based on if your parents are divorced or not. How old you are when you get married. If you get married really young, you're less likely to be happy because maybe you don't really have your identity set yet and you're going to be more likely to grow apart and be less satisfied with your marriage. How long you dated, right? The longer you've known someone, you kind of know better if they're going to be a good fit for you. Now, of course, these are all in general. I know there's going to be people whose parents met when they were 18 and dated for a week and then got married and been married for 50 years. But this is, generally speaking. Timing of the first pregnancy. The earlier you have the baby, the less marital satisfaction you have. There's this thing called a marital satisfaction U where you're really happy when you first get married. As soon as you have your first kid, the marital satisfaction drops, keeps dropping as you have your next kids, and marital satisfaction does not go back up to high levels until the children leave the home. So if you have your first kid really early on, then that marital satisfaction drops really quickly, and you're more likely to get a divorce. And the people that say, oh, I'm unhappy in my marriage, let's have a baby that'll fix everything. No, a baby has literally never fixed anything. Right? Babies just bring more stress to a relationship. What is your relationship with your extended family? If you have a good relationship with your parents and your siblings, you tend to be happier. If there's more strain there, or with your partner's family, it makes it harder to be happy in your marriage. Having financial and employment statuses in place, having enough money. Money is the number one reason people get divorced. So not having to worry as much about money will take away from that stress. Type of family responsibilities. Are you sharing them? Is one person feeling like they're having to do more than the other? That's going to, have an impact on marital satisfaction. And then just your personality characteristics. If you're someone who is more of a taker and the other person's also a taker, then you're not going to work out very well. If you're very needy and the other person is kind of resentful of you being needy, then that's going to have an impact on your marital satisfaction. So you got to find someone that that complements you, if personalities gel well together. Otherwise, you're going to be really dissatisfied with your marriage pretty quickly.